a while since I did a fairly in-depth video game review with gameplay footage and all that wonderful stuff. So it's time to get back to doing that with my review of Dragon Age 2. Quick note on spoilers. I have played Dragon Age Origins and, obviously, Dragon Age 2, but I have not played Inquisition yet. I have a few tidbits about the game's story that I know, but otherwise, I'd like you to refrain from spoiling Inquisition's story in the comments. I will get into spoilers of Dragon Age 2's story here, obviously, but I'm not going to give away the whole thing, so if you haven't played the game before, consider yourself warned. With that out of the way, let's get started. Dragon Age 2 is something of a story within a story, and is told from the perspective of Varric, a dwarven con artist and storyteller who's in turn being interrogated by Cassandra, a member of the Inquisition, who was demanding to know the truth of events leading to the start of a civil war between the Templars and the Mages in the world of Thedas, and how they relate to Hawke, also described as the champion of Kirkwall, or just, for brevity's sake, the champion. Now, for purposes of this review, I played this game on the Xbox 360, as I beat Dragon Age Origins on the Xbox 360 as well, and wanted to carry that save over, and I didn't deal with EA Origin on the PC. Much as with Mass Effect, you can choose any first name for your character. Their last name is always going to be the same. Hawke, in this case. I played a female Hawke who was a rogue specializing in two swords. Unfortunately, unlike in Dragon Age Origins, you aren't able to set up a two-weapon loadout for your character, or two-weapon loadouts that you can switch between more or less on the fly. In Dragon Age Origins, being able to do this lets you effectively play a character who could be available and effective in both ranged and melee combat. In Dragon Age 2, this means you have to pick one to specialize in. This unfortunately means that some party combinations become much more effective than others, and some party members are much less useful than others depending on what class you've chosen. The story is basically divided into 3 acts, each covering 1 year of time, with additional time happening in between each part. The first act is what I describe as the Scarface Act. Hawke and her family arrive in Kirkwall fleeing the Blight from the first game as refugees. Hawke has 2 siblings, a sister, Bethany, who is a mage, and who is not a member of any circle, and a brother, Carver, who is a fighter. Your mother, Leandra, is also present, and accompanies the party through this first portion, but she's a non-combatant. Now, if you roll a mage for your character during the escape from the Blight, Carver will survive the prologue, whereas if you roll a fighter, or in my case a rogue, Bethany will survive. During your escape, you also come across Aveline Vallon and her husband Wesley. Wesley is a Templar, putting him in conflict with the Hawke family. During your escape, Wesley is infected with Darkspawn Taint, and has to be put out of his misery, either by Hawke or by Aveline, depending on player choice. This first little prologue of the game sets up the combat system and trains the player in how combat works, as well as the conversation system and the revamped relationship system. Unlike in Dragon Age Origins, where you could piss off your party members to such a degree that they'd leave, the game instead uses a sliding scale of friendship to rivalry. Now, being rivals with the character doesn't mean that they hate you, or that you can't pursue a relationship with them. It's just that you disagree strongly, and this affects your character and how they interact in dialogue sequences, along with some mechanical effects. At the end of the sequence, you run into Flemeth, the Witch of the Wastes, and the mother of Morrigan from Origins. Odds are pretty good that if you played Origins, you probably killed Flemeth, because she was going to kill Morrigan and steal her body, and Morrigan really didn't like that. And if you were on good terms with Morrigan, neither did you. This whole sequence has Flemeth help you escape, and more importantly to the whole overall narrative, sets up a way for her to still be alive, which probably sets up something that will pay off later in Inquisition. On arriving in Kirkwall, you discover the city is flooded with refugees fleeing the Blight, with only a few getting in. You're given heads up on 2 possible ways to get your family into the city, both of which involves going into Hawke with one faction or another. One is contracting with some mercenaries, the other working with a local smuggler. Being a rogue and having Bethany, who is not necessarily on the best terms with the law, as my surviving sibling, I picked the job with the smuggler, which turns out means you have to extort money from a shopkeeper who's gouging the refugees. This escalates to you having to kill the shopkeeper, and thus leading to you working with the smuggler for a year, which occurs off camera, after which you spend the main body of the first act living in Kirkwall slums with your family and your uncle. The story proper starts with you meeting Varric. Varric's brother is planning an expedition to the deep roads following the Blight, but is short on needed capital to fund the whole thing. Your job is to raise that capital so you can buy into the expedition, with Varric helping you along the way. Over the course of the quest in this act, you end up encountering the other party members who will stay with you along the way, as well as getting to know the city and the factions in it. Along with Varric and Aveline is Meryl, a Dalish elvish mage who's gotten involved with blood magic, Anders, a former party member from the Dragon Age Origins Awakening DLC, Isabella, a pirate who you probably met on one of the story missions in Dragon Age Origins, and Fenris, the former elf slave of a Tevinter Magister who really doesn't like mages. Also marriages because he's a priest or monk or something like that, so he has a vow of chastity, so he's not getting married anytime soon. In the intervening year, another major plot issue has come up in Kirkwall. A shipload of Qunari who wreck near the city and won't leave, leading to tension within the city in between the Archduke who wants peace, the people who are afraid of the Qunari, and the faction of the Chantry who wants the Qunari wiped out because they practice a heretical religion, which is sort of a weird mix of Zen philosophy and fascism. It's kind of hard to explain. As part of this, the party learns that the Qunari have the secret of gunpowder. A dwarven merchant tries to work with you to get the secret from them, but the Qunari won't give it up. This comes up in later acts as a plot point. Also, in each act, there is a quest or quest chain related to your party members. Each party member has a few quests or social interactions you can engage in to forward their personal storyline and build rapport with them. Some have more material in one chapter than in another. For example, the meat of Varric's material is in Acts 2, your siblings' material is in Act 1, while Aveline, Meryl, and Anders have significant amounts of material in all 3 chapters. After raising up the Scratch to get involved, your expedition then heads to the Deep Roads. Your mother asks that you not bring your sibling with you on the expedition, and you can choose to ignore this advice. If you follow it, then your sibling will either join the local maid circle if it's Bethany, or join the Templars if it's Carver. If you don't follow your mother's advice, then that character dies unless Anders is in the party, because he's a former Grey Warden and knows the secret of the Grey Warden induction, and he can induce them into the Grey Wardens to save their lives. However, they then end up joining the Grey Wardens and are still not effectively available as a party member for much of the rest of the game. As part of the expedition, after finding a massive artifact made of pure lyrium, a magic-enhancing substance, Varric's brother, Bartrand, goes cuckoo and steals the artifact, leaving the party for dead and forcing them to fight their way out of the Deep Roads. In Act 2, you fared well from your expedition, though, with a whole bunch of loot that you pulled out and other such things, with Hawk making enough cash to move the family out of the slums and into the nice part of town, back in their mother's old family estate. However, now the situation with the Qunari is coming to a head, and they, and the faction of the Chantry that hates them, is trying much, much harder to start a war. It is ultimately revealed over the course of this arc that the reason the Qunari aren't leaving is because Isabella stole a copy of one of the Qunari's most sacred religious texts for a client, and she won't give it up if her relationship with Hawk isn't strong enough, and will leave the party if they insist. For me, this led to the Qunari attempting to pillage the city, and the party having to fight their way to the palace, and ultimately having to duel the Arashok, the leader of the Qunari in Kirkwall, in a battle to the death. The meat of Varric's side quests are in this chapter, with it being revealed that Bartrand has returned and has been driven mad by the artifact. You make your way to his new estate and discover that Bartrand no longer has the artifact, but his mind has been horrifically damaged by it, with the player having to choose whether to kill Bartrand or put him in a sanitarium. I took the sanitarium option. Also in this chapter, the party has to deal with a serial killer who is murdering women in the city, ultimately leading to the death of Hawk's mother, leaving Hawk, in my game, with only her uncle and Bethany for family. This is potentially worse from an emotional standpoint for Hawk if their other sibling died in the Deep Roads, effectively leaving them with no immediate family save from their uncle, which is technically extended family. In Act 3, while one problem is resolved, the Qunari issue, another issue has begun to come to a boil. Meredith, the leader of the local Templar chapter, has effectively taken over the city and is ruling with an ever-clenching iron fist, terrorizing the mages in the process and driving many of them to become blood mages. From how I roleplayed it, this is especially a problem for my Hawk, as this was endangering her only surviving immediate family. Attempting to resolve the situation ultimately fails, as Anders destroys the Chantry in Kirkwall in an attempt to basically escalate things further, and it succeeds. He starts a direct war between the Templar and the mages, one which the mages are at risk of losing, unless Hawk steps up and sides with the mages, which in my playthrough she did. In the final fight of the game, it's revealed that Meredith purchased the artifact from Bartrand and has been driven totally insane, leaving her paranoid and absolutely psychotic. Hawk and her allies ultimately have to take down Meredith before, ultimately in my game, being forced to flee the city. I might as well get the narratives out of the way before I wrap this up. Because narratively of how this game is structured, the game's dungeons are very monotonous. You will frequently end up returning to the same dungeons at different parts of the game, with different areas becoming available or new monsters having moved in, which can make quests kinda tedious. Also, instead of being able to select the armor for your party members, you buy upgrades for the armor of your specific characters in your party, or get those upgrades at quest rewards, usually through their storyline quests for those party members. Combine this fact with the fact that you can't swap weapon loadouts, and you're frequently going to find yourself with an inventory full of weapons that you're not built to use, and armor that you can't equip. You can still quickly mark the weapons you don't want as junk, and sell them with a button press to the next vendor, but it's still a hassle. The armor issue is probably even worse, because theoretically the game should be able to say, oh, the only character who can equip different armor is a rogue. We're only going to drop armor for rogues. We're not going to drop mage armor because there aren't any characters who can equip a mage armor in the party, and never will be. It's something of a mess and a hassle. Now, on top of this is the issues with the codex. In Dragon Age Origins, when I viewed a weapon, I could view the lore attached to that weapon when I was looking over the stats. It helped flesh out the world and made a weapon seem more special. In Dragon Age 2, that lore is added to the codex as opposed to being directly attached to the weapon, which means you have to actively hunt that information down instead of being able to view it with the weapon it's attached to. Now, some people may prefer things that way, but I really don't. I play RPGs for the story, not for the fat loot drops and the inventory management. I mean, getting a newer, hotter, cooler weapon is always nice, but if it's a cool weapon with a neat story attached, I am all for that, and I will prefer that weapon over one that just has slightly better stats. In conclusion, I see why Dragon Age 2 got a lot of crap when it came out. Between the DLC and some patches, though, I'd say it's a fun, enjoyable, narratively rich RPG with some fun and interesting characters who I enjoyed spending my time with. And since all of my party members made it out of the game alive, I'm hoping I get to meet some of them again in Dragon Age Inquisition, but that's something for a later review after I've played that game. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the show, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for notification when the next episode comes out. If you'd like to support the show, and possibly even request other games or films or books or whatever for me to review, please toss me a few bucks via my Patreon back page up here. Backing at certain levels gets your name in the credits, and also gets you the option to pick topics for future episodes. So, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.